Stories from Maine is a collection of true tales and legendary stories of daring, heroism, absurdity, disaster, and spectacle, all proving why many of the greatest legends in American history are our stories from Maine. As Maine was settled and founded, one industry arose that would command a worldwide need and fuel an economic stream that would give Maine a legendary inland reputation, provide tens of thousands of families with a living, and would help to create a mythical pine tree legend, one which lives on in monument, family heritage, and in American literature. Stay with us and hear the story of Maine's logging industry. Next, on this episode of Stories from Maine, our podcast begins right now.
This is our Stories from Maine podcast for the fourth week of May, 2025. Stories from Maine is authored by historian Lori Suzanne Dell. Her books, Stories from Maine and Stories from Maine 2, as well as all of her books, are available through book retailers and can be found on Amazon. You can follow Stories from Maine on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Spotify at Stories from Maine. And you can email us at storiesfrommaine@gmail.com.
Now, sit back and hear the true history of Maine's logging industry on this episode of Stories from Maine.
As Maine was settled and founded, one industry arose that would command a worldwide need and fuel an economic stream that would give Maine an inland reputation, provide tens of thousands of families with a living, and would help to create a mythical pine tree legend, which lives on in monument and in literature. Maine is best known for its lobster, blueberries, potatoes, maple syrup, and shipbuilding. Yet, once upon a time, in the pine tree state, the industry of logging lumber was larger than all of those examples combined. The first believed Maine logging occurred at Popham, Maine in 1607. This is when European settlers not only foraged and gathered firewood for warmth and for cooking, but also cut trees for the building of log homes and for the building of the first Maine-built ship. Other logging became prominent in the following years when masked agents, representing the British monarchy, arrived at what is now Stroudwater, to harvest lumber for the making of ships' masts and other shipbuilding lumber. As Maine began to populate, logging enterprises spread from Kittery to the Canadian border. Eventually, the commercial industry of logging became a prominent way of life in Maine. In time, Maine would become the lumbering capital of the United States. From lumber harvesting, for use in building supplies, to shipbuilding, are used as firewood. And, in later times, lumber to fulfill Maine's needs for a manufacturing industry that would see the pine tree state become the toothpick capital of the world. By 1734, the first Maine paper-making mill was founded, in what would become Westbrook. Though most paper was once made from old rags, by the late 1800s, wood pulp was added, due to a shortage of used rags. And, the demand for more of Maine's renewable resource of timber, only grew. The need for wood to make boxes, crates, furniture, lobster traps, and nearly everything Americans needed, in both business and in personal life, was also harvested, transported, milled, and shipped. And, much of what was harvested was also shipped to other countries. Maine's logging industry had become a worldwide financial juggernaut. Lumber was commonly hauled out of the woods on skid sleds, that were pulled by teams of horses, mules, or oxen, and often taken to the river's edge where the logs were splashed into the water, gathered into floats, and guided down to a mill, which was also built on a river's edge, where the rushing waters powered many massive, sharp saws. By the late 1800s, Bangor, Maine is believed to have become the largest lumber shipping port in Maine. Nearly 9 trillion board feet of lumber was shipped from there, between 1832 and 1888. In the latter 19th and early 20th centuries, Maine loggers lived in logging camps and were fed 4 meals per day. The most respected person in a logging camp was, believe it or not, the camp cook. Often, he or she was also counted on for doctoring of injuries or illnesses and, much like a bartender, often doled out advice as a de facto camp counselor. Without him or her, the camp would not succeed. Many dozens of loaves of bread, barrels of donuts, pans of pies, tins of cakes, stacks of flapjacks, dozens of cookies, gallons of soups and stews, tens of gallons of coffee and tea, and platters full of assorted fish, meats and vegetables, were all baked, fried, boiled, steamed, simmered, sautéed, and served up daily. Although keeping the camps clean and sanitary was usually a resident's responsibility, after the American Civil War, cleanliness at such camps was regarded as a health risk priority. Yet, the camp sleeping quarters often smelled of sweat and wood smoke. Each day these men would endure the spring, summer, and fall hardships of mosquito and black fly bites, bee stings, wasp strikes, tick infestations, poison oak and poison ivy rashes, sunburns, heat waves, high humidity, and much more. During the winter months, frigid cold temperatures, life-challenging wind chills, and limb-threatening frostbite were the common enemy battled by every man. Sprains, splinters, cuts, scrapes, wound infections, broken bones, pulled muscles, torn ligaments, and every kind of injury imaginable could be counted on to befall each man at some point, if not more often. These hardened loggers worked each day from sun up to sundown, and many men were killed while harvesting Maine's timbers. Some, those who worked the log flows on the rivers, would drown as many did not know how to swim, or they might be lost under the immovable log pack. And, if one survived all of this, by the turn of the 20th century, an average Maine logger could count on a monthly salary of just under $20, depending on the man's specialty. Some loggers specialized in driving and caring for the livestock, used to haul the lumber. These teamsters also acted as the groomers, vets, and feeders of the workhorses and oxen primarily used each day. Other specialties might include the use of explosives to free log jams on the rivers, or the measuring of logs and keeping track of the more accountant-like work often involved. These scalers were men who were more educated than the others, and thus they also made a bit more money. By 1900, thousands of Maine men described their livelihoods as being connected to the Maine woods, or to the lumber industry. Additionally, many Canadian men also came to Maine to make a living, deep within the Maine woods. By the mid-1900s, Maine's logging industry began a slow decline. Mechanization took a toll on the need for human labor, as motorized equipment replaced the teamsters and sleds that hauled logs from the depths of the forests. More trains also became widely employed to haul timbers to the mills. Powered portable saws cut out many sawyers and axemen, which were then replaced. And the use of small engine-powered boats helped to eliminate the need for men to work on the floes of lumber that were guided down the rivers to the waiting sawmills. In the post-World War II world, the use of the new plastics and polystyrenes further reduced America's need for wooden products, and as more mechanization and modernization of mills came to be, even mill and factory jobs began to decline. Shipbuilding also began eliminating the use of wood in ships, in favor of steel and aluminum, a move which also reduced the need for Maine lumber. Advances in more technologically modern home building, using more masonry and steel, also saw a reduction in the need for Maine's logging produce. And, better, widespread education, coupled with better labor laws, allowed for better employment options in America and in New England. Thus, there was a reduction of available men to labor in the Maine woods. By the 1970s, the beginning of an environmental drive for better conservation and more use of recycling, added to the advancements of technology, signaled a near-death knell to the industry. The truthful reality of the history of the Maine lumberjack is one of hard work, hard times, and harsh reality. Yet, the fairy tale life of the Maine lumberjack has been captured in such mythical tales as Paul Bunyan and Babe, his Blue Ox. Although the origin of this storybook fame is also coveted by other states, it is in Bangor, Maine, where the greatest monument to Paul Bunyan exists. Yet, the truth of Maine's lumberjacks, our loggers, is no myth. It has always been, and remains, a hard and dangerous profession. And, Maine's woodsmen were the first true vertebrae in the backbone of the pine tree state. Maine's woodsmen and lumberjacks have fed the world's lumber need for over 400 years, and have become one of the most enduring of all of our stories from Maine.
We hope you have enjoyed this week's feature story. All new weekly episodes of our Stories from Maine podcast streams each Saturday on our YouTube and Spotify channels. Please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Stories from Maine. And we hope you will visit our Stories from Maine page on Facebook, where over 40,000 subscribers learn why many of the greatest legends in American history are our stories from Maine. Thanks for listening.
Our weekly Stories from Maine article, published in the Brunswick, Maine newspaper, The Times Record, can be found on newsstands each Friday and can be viewed online. The Stories from Maine logos are a registered trademark of Laurie Suzanne Dell, and all original content is copyright 2025, with all rights reserved. Please come back next Saturday for another all-new episode of Stories from Maine. Thanks for listening.